The other day, I was watching some old romantic comedies and teen movies from the 80s and noticed something very different about them compared to the movies I grew up watching in the 2000s. In 80s movies, the female leads tend to be girl next door pretty, as in they look like actual women you see in real life, whereas 2000s female leads tend to be over-sexualized and don't really look like the standard pretty girl unless you live in Los Angeles. And as most of us also remember, 2000s movies are heavily centered around weight and appearances, basically regardless of genre. The female leads are always picking apart their appearance and others and talking about the ways in which they will lose weight, who's fat, who's not, and so on. And this heightened focus on appearances in 2000s films coincides with society's shift into being an image-based attention economy, with the new technology of digital cameras ushering in a culture of heightened body surveillance, diet culture and cosmetic surgeries, and endless amounts of adult content online, which fundamentally change the ways in which we see and experience ourselves, others, and the world around us. In this video, I'm going to explore the digital camera revolution of the late 90s and early 2000s because it not only epitomized the change in culture of the 21st century and the new millennium, it is actually the biggest technological revolution since the printing press, in my opinion. It completely fundamentally changed the ways that we see ourselves and others. And in order to explore that and understand how it shaped the psyches of millennials and Gen Z, who grew up alongside this whole thing, we have to go back to 1990 when the first digital camera became commercially available. And with that, let's get into the video.
Plastic surgery is on the rise. Tape out of my life.
Most people shoot their pictures with conventional cameras and film. But now with digital cameras, you can actually store those images with removable memory cards like this, or on the hard drive, or even on the internal memory of the camera. You just connect the camera to your computer, download the images you want, and voila, you got pictures.
So technological revolutions, by definition, happen extremely rapidly. They completely overhaul interdependently connected systems of technology, mass communication, the culture at large. They really kind of revolutionize and change every aspect of society. And digital cameras, in the span of 14 years, became commercially available to the point where over 40% of Americans owned one in 2004. Digital cameras were revolutionary and popular because, unlike analog film, you could practically store an infinite amount of pictures on a digital camera. You could also see the pictures as they were being taken on LCD screens, and transporting them through the internet was super rapid. You didn't have to wait for film to develop in darkrooms and only see what you got the next day after a lengthy and expensive process. And this technology really democratized filmmaking. You could practice with your friends out in the backyard and you weren't held back by expensive film and developing costs. It just kind of changed the landscape. And I'll talk about YouTube a little bit later on. But if you want to know how quickly the quality of digital cameras increased, I think anyone who's been on YouTube since the beginning has seen how videos that used to be shot on what seems like toaster ovens are now being shot in Ultra HD 4K, which I can't even display for you because my computer's too old to process or view those files. So not only were people taking more photographs than they ever had before, but the high quality images were just something that the untrained eye had never seen before. And to highlight how digital cameras caused a culture of self-surveillance and reflection to a degree that hadn't been seen since the invention of mirrors, I want to really focus on the early tabloid culture of the 2000s, the absolutely insane culture that tabloids had on us, because I think that really affected the psyches and development of people growing up in this period. And it really also epitomizes the attention economy and how we developed as an image-based society. So let's get into tabloids and paparazzi. The popularization of digital cameras at the turn of the 21st century led to a culture where high-quality digital photos of celebrities in compromising situations and unflattering angles were being printed and distributed at every grocery store checkout line, as digital cameras allowed paparazzi to essentially take a picture every second with no worries of running out of storage. And despite Princess Diana famously dying in a car crash in 1997 while trying to escape the paparazzi, tabloid culture only grew in its ruthlessness and inescapability into the full decade of the 2000s. Tabloid culture also kind of serves as an example of clickbait that we see all on the internet today. They would literally take any image and just make up lies about it to get your attention and make a click or a sale. They were constantly accusing celebrities of having eating disorders, drug habits. Are they going through a divorce? Is she pregnant? Who knows? Just making shit up to see what people will tune into. And the entire economy of paparazzi is based on the commodification of attention, where people can literally make a living photographing people with more social capital than them and distributing those images online and in tabloids. And then, of course, with the development of channels like TMZ, it was no longer just print photographs, but celebrity videos that paparazzi were capitalizing on too. To me, one of the greatest effects that tabloids had on the culture, however, was their function as an object of horror. So for the first time in your life, you're seeing these really high quality, unflattering images of celebrities all around you, pointing out all of their flaws, creating up new flaws in order to sell you products, and just creating this heightened culture of surveillance where even in private moments on the beach, etc., you're seeing people being photographed without their consent and displayed to you. And it also teaches you exactly what you need to look like to avoid such ruthless public shaming, because these tabloids were absolutely ruthless. And you could say that because it's just celebrities, it shouldn't affect the average consumer, but I do think that this landscape was so new and just so ruthless that how could that not affect you when this new technology is being showcased to you in this way? And all of your friends now have digital cameras and social media is about to be a thing, which is a whole other can of worms. I think it just ultimately has more of an effect than people realize, especially when combined with everything else going on in this era. And while digital cameras were evolving to be more and more realistic, we also saw the evolution of things like Photoshop that were just completely unprecedented in terms of their ability to manipulate photos. And that brings us into the next section, Photoshop, plastic surgery, and profiting off perfection. In 1990, an image processing software that could digitally alter scanned film photographs was licensed by Adobe Incorporated and sold as Photoshop. While analog graphic design was very limited in how much they could truly doctor and alter a photograph, you could basically just get rid of blemishes and wrinkles with a physical airbrushing tool. By the early 2000s, people quickly realized just how far you could edit photos with Photoshop, to where you can actually change body proportions on people. You can make completely different images from what exists on the actual original photograph. And photographs being shot in binary code instead of on film just allowed for greater freedom when it comes to digital manipulation. Advertising also shifted from being mostly illustration to digital photography as a result of these developments. And while advertising had always followed the formula of sex selling, they were never able to alter photographs to the degree that they could perfect every element of a model's body and posing, to where models became models for digitally perfected images rather than being models in and of themselves. Unlike traditional portraiture, however, where you know the image is a perfected version of a physical model, digital photographs are typically seen as an accurate representation of reality, and in that sense, I think digital editing is a lot more sneaky when it comes to our perception of an image. Because these images are less artistic to begin with and are meant to mirror reality, especially at this time period where this technology was so unprecedented, people really couldn't catch up to just the level of sheer manipulation these images went through. And that combined with the tabloids tearing people down for every flaw and everything going on in the media, I think really increased people's body surveillance and fear. But this mixture of tabloid and Photoshop culture really met the perfect storm with the rising cosmetic surgery industry, and all those three industries together just capitalized so much on people's insecurities at this time. And the early 2000s saw several prominent reality shows introducing and normalizing extensive plastic surgeries as a cure for the insecurities brought on by the digital era.
Sylvia Swamplan will begin with her face. She'll receive cheek implants, a chin implant, nose job, fat transfer to the face, mole removal, ear surgery and a brow lift. For Sylvia's body, she'll have liposuction in 5 different areas.
All 3 will undergo the same procedures. De-gobbled with a neck lift, de-beaked with a nose job, de-frowned with a brow lift and upper and lower eyelid lift, de-lighted with a breast lift and reduction, and a tummy tuck. And after being de-veined, the gobbles will be divine.
And if you're a millennial or Gen Z, or maybe even Gen X, you might have grown up just assuming that women were always getting plastic surgery to one degree or another, but it's actually a very recent field. Like the first breast implants were put in 1960 or 1962, and then things have just really exploded since then. Because up until the 1960s, nearly all plastic surgeries were reconstructive, meaning they were developed to fix deformities and injuries caused by war and trauma. But beginning in the 60s, plastic surgeons shifted their focus towards cosmetic surgeries, and that really exploded in the 2000s. To quote from the American Society of Plastic Surgeons, in 2003, more than 8.7 million cosmetic procedures were performed, 32% more than 2002. Over the same period, ASPS members performed 64% more procedures involving injectables because Botox became FDA approved in 2002, I believe. And by 2004, 14.8 million plastic surgery procedures were performed in the United States. And by 2006, that number had risen to 16.2 million. In 2006 as well, the 14-year moratorium on silicone breast implants was ended, allowing it to return to the market because there was some concerns for a while over the safety of that procedure, to where now it's one of the most popular plastic surgeries to this day. I think it's what most people probably think of when they think of plastic surgery. And I also do think it's really worth mentioning that this period also coincides with 9/11 here in the United States, which was a time of widespread paranoia, increased surveillance, the government was literally spying on all of us, and a general feeling of feeling completely out of control. And as we know with eating disorders, when you feel out of control in your external life, it becomes so much easier to hyper-focus on your weight, how you look, things that you can control, as a form of regaining that sense of security. And I think plastic surgeries, tabloids, everything I talk about in this video, again, it's the perfect storm. It coincided with 9/11, coincided with all of this stuff to completely explode and change the culture. And again, to add even more to this perfect storm of being an image-based society, we then see the growth and popularization of the internet. And part of what grew and popularized the internet was adult content. Because I try to stay out of it in all my digital history, internet history videos, but you really can't talk about the development of the internet without also talking about the distribution and streaming of adult content online. And so that brings us to our next section, the internet is for porn.
Normal people don't sit at home and look at porn on the internet. What?
You have no idea.
So both because people are perverted and it's literally why we exist in the world, sex and adult content has always been intertwined with new technologies. Ever since people learned how to draw, they've been drawing titties and dicks all over the place. And in the modern technological era, adult content drove the early adoption of VCR and home video, as the ability for private viewing was obviously preferable for most compared to going to a public movie theater and watching films in a room full of strangers, although I'm sure there are people who definitely preferred that. And this same philosophy of private viewing and distribution really propelled the growth of the internet, because now instead of going to a video rental store and talking to the guy behind the counter about the crazy shit that you want to watch, you could simply get it personally to you through your computer. And I say instantly available, but I'm pretty sure at this time it took like 2 minutes to load a photograph on the screen. I don't know, y'all, I'm too young for that shit. And this use of the internet caused rapid increases in bandwidth, the adoption of technologies such as webcams, and the MPEG-4 compressed video file format. To quote from the book, The Erotic Engine by Patchen, which is where most of my information for this section is coming from, he says, in 2000, mainstream movie companies were trying to sell humongous video files that could barely be squeezed through the fastest DSL connection at a time when only 10% of Americans had high-speed internet connections. Meanwhile, thousands of compressed, manageable, full-length adult movies were already flowing through 28.8K modems. Only when the bandwidth and users were already in place was the internet ready for non-pornographic services such as YouTube, CNN.com, and Flickr, all of which depend on sending images, text, and videos through the very pipelines that were created through the buying, selling, stealing, and trading of pornography. And all the way back in 1995, the stripper named Danny Ash created the most popular website on the internet, selling softcore content of herself on the internet. And to read this gem of a quote from the book, as a self-described geek with big breasts, she could not have been more predisposed to making money on the internet had she been genetically engineered. Still so true even to this day. And so Danny's hard drive remained the most popular website on the net for 2 years straight. She quickly became a millionaire practically overnight and told a journalist in 2002, quote, "If it were not for the adult industry, Cisco never would have sold so many routers or spun as many servers as they have." And the mainstreaming of adult content into public consciousness online also occurred in 1996 when Pamela Anderson and Tommy Lee's sex tape was famously stolen from their home and distributed on the internet. introducing to the public that just as the printing press was able to make hundreds of copies of a book in the same time it would take a manuscript maker to make one, video files can be replicated and uploaded exponentially faster than developing and distributing film tapes. We also saw in the 2000s not only great violations of privacy when celebrity tapes were leaked without their consent, but we also saw the attention economy in full swing to where you could now be famous for being famous, and celebrities would leak their own tapes for money and notoriety and fame and the like. It was basically no holds barred, pay attention to me, doesn't matter how or why, just pay attention to me. And that's how the economy now functions pretty much. And because digital imagery is so much less flattering than film as well, this high definition quality of infinite content basically also played into the increases in cosmetic and plastic surgeries, to where, not to, talk my shit, but there's so many people who in photographs look great, but in real life look so dystopian, where it's like I hope you kept your receipt from the surgeon. Like, I'm so sorry about your face. But to conclude, the point of this video is simply to explain that we really are shaped by the technology around us. It affects the way that we view and see things. I am going to make a part 2 to this video on the social media revolution, because it kind of amplifies everything that I talked about in this video to an even larger extent and even quicker. But laying down those foundations, I hope it just helps you to make sense of millennials who constantly think they're fat when they're not, or why people are, not having sex as much as they used to, even though everything is really over-sexualized, or why cosmetic surgeries just continually rise every single year. Like, there's a lot of things going on in society that are a result of it becoming image-based as a result of the digital camera revolution that I think we need to keep in mind when it comes to making sense of this chaotic and crazy world. But I'll get off my soapbox from now. If you would like to see part 2, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss it. And I'll see you guys then. Bye.